just waiting eagerly to hear your message.
Okay. You just press the button. Okay, let's start. Om Ajnanatimrandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Sri Guror Sri Yuttapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvatam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindha Deenabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradaine Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvashe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Janmadhyasya Tonvayaditaratas Charte Subhigya Swarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Mayantiyat Suraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargom Visha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Swasti Astu Vishwasya Khalah Prasidatam Dhyayantu Bhutani Shivam Mitho Dhiya Manasya Bhadram Bhajtada Dhokshajay Avishyatam No Matirapya Hetuki. So we continue to study Bhagavatam 5th Canto, chapter 8, beginning from text number 7. This is a story of one of the very great emperor of India, whose name was Bharata, who renounced his kingdom and went to meditate in the Himalayas. And he was living in a hut on the bank of Gandaki river in Nepal. And he became very highly advanced on the path of meditation on Krishna Bhakti Yoga. One day when he was on the bank of river in the morning meditating, then one deer, female deer, a doe, came to drink water, and she was pregnant. And just then a lion roared from the backside, and the doe became very fearful, and to protect herself jumped on the other side of the river. In the mountain the rivers are not very wide. But when she did that, Then the fetus fell off into the water, and in the process he died. So the king who was sitting on the bank, he was witnessing this, and he felt very compassionate on the baby deer. So he lifted him out of the water and brought home to his hut and took care. And then he became very much attached to that deer. This is what is being described here. So says that tam tu eda kunukam kripanam srotasanuhiyamanam avivikshapi viddham bandhuriva anukampaya rajarshi bharata adaya mrita mataram iti ashram padam anayat. So he brought him to his own ashram, knowing that his mother is dead, and he was full of compassion for the baby deer, the cub, and saw that he was fallen into the water and could drown. So he brought him to his own place. So the commentary says, Ernakunakam, the word Ernakunakam means Haranbalkam, the baby deer. Apaviddham bandhuvis taktamiti etahi kunkatvadi hetubhir ya anukampataya. And he was lonely because the mother died and there was no other deer, so he thought that there is no one else to protect him. So he brought and started taking care of him. So in spiritual life, when one takes to spiritual life seriously, then some obstacles come. Usually obstacles come on a very good path. And if you try to learn dancing, there can be obstacles to that. But especially if you take to spiritual practice, then obstacles are bound to come. So one should be prepared for that. Don't get scared. And why obstacles come? Because we have various experiences from the past which are not conducive to spiritual life. We have done things in the past which we have relished, we have enjoyed, appreciated. So those impressions are inside us. The samskaras are lying in the heart. And when one is performing spiritual practice, which means one is trying to get out of the material attachments, bondage to material activities, material relations, material possessions, things which keep us binding to the material world. Because that's the meaning of spiritual life. Which means one is trying to elevate oneself from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. And when one is trying to do that, then the material consciousness pulls you down. Some obstacles one can understand that they are obstacles. Some are difficult to understand. So those obstacles which look like similar to spiritual life, they are difficult to understand. If an enemy comes as an enemy, you can recognize that this is an enemy. But if an enemy comes with a mask of friend, then it is difficult that he is an enemy. So many times people do that and they want to cheat you. And then they put a facade of friendship. And then they exploit you. So this is not only external but also inside us. Inside us we have enemies which look like friends, which look like relatives, which look like they are our benefactor. And it's very difficult to understand them. So these stories of Bhagavatam are very instructive because they warn us about these things which have happened in the life of others. So we can take lesson from that without going through the trouble ourselves. So that is one of the instructions. There are many instructions in the story and this is one of them. And these types of obstacles come in a very subtle way, and then mind starts rationalizing the attachment, how it is good. And the reason is that these things have helped us in the past in some sense. So now also we think that this is useful for me. So that is the description being given here. So he says, the next verse says that Tasya hava ena kunka uchchairetasmin kritanij abhimanasya arahas tatposhana palana lalana prinana anudhyanena atma niyamaha sahayamaha purusa parichayadaya ekekasaya katipayena ahar ganena vyujyamana kil sarva eva udvasa. So now this is the situation which is being described, how the obstacles come and choke up the spiritual life completely. So sometimes there are creepers which don't have roots and they grow on the tree. They look very nice, but after some time they cover up the whole tree and the tree dies. So it's something like that. So he says, Tasya hena kunka uchchaira etasmin kritamajabhimana. He developed an attachment to this deer cub, thinking this is like my son, and it is helpless, and I am the protector of this. And every day he was taking care of this. Poshana, palana, lana, feeding him, cuddling, fondling, like people do to dogs. Take them around, take to a dog park, sit down, and the dog is playing and you are watching. So this is what he was doing with the baby deer. Prinan Anudhyanan, he was loving him very much and thinking about him. And in the process he forgot about his own spiritual practice, his own sadhana. Atma Niyama Sahayama, his rules and regulations such as Purusha Paricharayade, worshipping of the Lord, which he was doing puja, morning worship, chanting of the mantra. He says, Ekekasha, one by one, slowly, Katipayena, Aharganena, Vyujyamana. So he lost, because he got more and more entangled and attached with the deer, and then he stopped his own spiritual practice completely. Sarvaya Udvasa. Everything was just dropped. So this is very interesting story, how it happened. So he says that Poshana Trinadina Palanam. So he will go and get some grass from the field and feed, and feel very happy by doing that. And he will watch the deer eating it. And deer is very innocent looking, big nice eyes. So he will feel very happy by doing that. And then he will caress the deer, scratch his back, see that he is clean, there is no dirt on his body, and he will lalan means chumban, he will kiss him, and the deer will sit in his lap and he will play with him. So the deer became like a toy for him. Etai yad anudhyanam asakti stene udvasamud sannava. So then slowly he became very much attached to the deer, and then all his regular practice, he was getting up early morning, going to the river, taking a dip, then sitting and meditating. All this he gave up. But now he became completely busy with the baby deer. अहोबतयम हरिण कुणका कृपण ईश्वर रथचरण परिभ्रमण रयेण स्वगण सुहृद बंधुभ्य परिवर्जित शरणं च मोपसादितो मामेव माता पितरो भ्रातृ ज्ञातिनि यौथिकांश्चैव उपेयाय नान्यं कश्चन वेद मय्यति विश्रब्धश्चात एव मया मत्परायणस्य पोषण पालन प्रीणन लालन अनुसूया अनुष्ठेयम sarannupeksha dosavidusha. So he was thinking like this in his mind, that oh indeed, how surprising is this, that this baby deer is very innocent and without any shelter. He is, by the will of Lord, by the influence of time, somehow he is lost association from his clan, from his group. He is under my shelter, and he thinks that I am his mother, I am his father, I am his brother, I am his relative, and he knows nobody else except me. So he is completely devoted to me and dependent on me. And now I should not be a fault finder or think that if I take care of this deer, then I will lose my practice. Why? Because there is a principle that if someone comes and takes your shelter, then it becomes your duty to take care of that. And if you don't do that, then you become irreligious. You should never abandon somebody who is dependent on you. So there are so many stories. In the case of Lord Ramchandra, when he was preparing to fight with Ravana, who has kidnapped his wife Sita. At that time Ravana's brother was Vibhishana, and Vibhishana was trying to argue with his own brother that why you are doing this, why have you kidnapped the wife of Rama, he should return, this is not proper for a king like him. But Ravana did not listen, and he thought that this fellow is not my brother, he is talking about enemy, he is favoring my enemy. So he kicked him away. So when Vibhishana came to the camp of Lord Ramchandra, who was camping outside Sri Lanka. So when he came, then all the assistants of Lord Rama, they went and told him that his brother, be careful, because how do we know? Because he said he wants to take shelter of Lord Rama and all. So everybody was against it, then don't give shelter to him, he is brother of enemy. So he will take shelter, he will know everything about us, and then he will go and tell it to him. He will be in trouble. So Lord Ramchandra, he refused to listen to them. He says that it is my vrata, my promise, my vow, my principle, that anybody who comes and takes my shelter, I will never abandon him. Even if someone says even once that I surrender to you, then I consider this as incumbent upon me to protect that person. So king is saying that I am an emperor, I was an emperor, I gave protection to so many people, and I know this principle. So now I cannot just drop this deer and say, well, this guy is just a problem for my spiritual practice. And there are so many other deer, why I have to worry? You can go and play with them and be with them. So he was thinking that to think like that will be impious. So this is how the mind, when it becomes attached to something, then it will rationalize the attachment. Because human mind is a very interesting phenomena. Whatever it wants to do, it will find logic for that. So whenever you do something, you always do thinking it is right. Even if you want to smoke, drink, do any nonsense, take drugs, you will have a logic for that. Because you think this is the right thing. This is how mind works. Whenever you have some attachment, then mind will give you logic, rationale for that. Why you should do this, why it is good for you to do that, why it is appropriate action to do that. It is others who will think that this guy is so foolish, he cannot see that this is stupid to do such a thing. But you will not see that. You may see it later on after the act is done. Then you may realize and repent. But when you engage in the activity, then you always have some support for this. So therefore king is also now thinking in the same way that if he is under my shelter, he is dependent on me, and if I don't take care of him, what will happen to him? If he dies, I cannot bring him back to life. But if I don't do my sadhana, I can still do it later on. So sadhana can be done later on, but if he dies, you cannot bring him back to life. So it is more important to take care of him than to engage in spiritual practice. And being a king, he has also done this in the past, giving shelter. So this is his logic. Asaktim prapanchayati aho ityadina. So Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti says that in this text, his attachment is being explained. As earlier in the previous verse it was said that he became attached. Now that attachment is being expanded. How the attachment or how he was attached. So, aho ityadina, saying aho. Kritanusangayati etat paryantena in the next two verses. Ishwarasya rathacharanah kalachakram tasme tasya paribhramana vegena parivarjita. So he says this is all influence of time. In India we have a lot of talk about time. Say, well, the time was like that. Because time is one of the cause behind every action. Whatever you do, good or bad, time is one of the factors in it. Nothing happens before time. Right? Everything happens when it's appropriate time for it to happen. So when something has to happen, then your mind becomes favorable to act like that. So he's saying that this was some Kala Chakra, some cycle, time is called Kala Chakra, so it's rotating, so that it happened like this. Otherwise, it could have happened half an hour before I went there. I would not know it. It would have happened 5 minutes after I left. I would not have known it. Why did it happen when I was there? What is the hidden message? The hidden message is that I have to take care of this. So he is convincing himself more and more why he has to take care. So it was not, because nothing happens by accident. Everything is planned. We think it happened accidentally. But those who know the law of karma, they know that it's just, this is how things were arranged. We may not know. Jyotish people know. Right? They can predict what will happen on 1st December 2012. Others, they don't know. So therefore he says that Ratha Iswarasya Ratha Charana, Kala Chakra. So the time is said to be here the wheel of Lord's chariot. Lord's chariot is moving, that is the movement of the time. Sometimes you see that Vishnu is holding the disc on his finger. That is the Kala Chakra. It shows that he is the controller of time. Because time is represented by a wheel, because it has no beginning and no end, and it is moving. It is rotating in cycles, and he has it on his finger. Means he is beyond time. He is the master of time. So tasya paribhramana vegena parivarjita. So somehow by the influence of time he was born like this. What can be done? Ma manusuya nayatam nimittamam swartha bhrasati. So now I should not think that if I take care of this baby deer, then I will lose my spiritual life. I should not be selfish like this. Because who are great people? The difference between great person and ordinary person is that ordinary person are selfish. They work only for their own self, for their own body, or maybe their own family. They don't go beyond that. Ordinary people are just within their family. Their mind, their consciousness does not go beyond that. And great people are those who think in a bigger cycle, bigger circle, who think of the world, who think of humanity, think of society, right? They are considered as great people. So now he is thinking that if I just do my sadhana, then I am being very selfish. Because I am only worried about myself. And this poor fellow is going to die. So I should not be selfish like that. Good logic, right? It's not easy to defeat this logic. So that's why we have to read the story, that how our mind can also work like this. So it is easy to see when someone else is making a mistake. It's difficult to see when we do the same thing. When someone is doing something, we say, why is he doing that? But actually, if we are put in the same situation, probably we will do the same. So at least we learn to see by hearing the story, and then if we are intelligent, we can remember that whether this is right or wrong. So we have to always use our discrimination faculty to distinguish what is right, what is wrong. It's one of the most important tools which God has given us. And we cannot put it in our bag and let it rest there. We have to exercise all the time. So doshta drishti makurvata saranya kartrik upekshayam dosham janata. He says, I know the defect of not giving shelter or neglecting a person who has been given shelter. So there are two ways you can make mistake. One is knowingly, other is unknowingly. If I did not know that a person who is dependent on you should be given protection, shelter, taken care of, and then I renounce that person, then I am making a mistake unknowingly. But if I know, then I am doing it knowingly, and the reaction of doing a mistake knowingly is more severe than doing something unknowingly. It is not same. In the ordinary law, state law also, if it was not your real intention to do something, then judges consider the intention also of the person. It's one of the important factors in jurisprudence, the intention. Whether the person was actually intending to commit crime or it happened incidentally. So there is different punishment for it. So King Bharat says that I know this, therefore how can I neglect this deer? There's a very nice story in Mahabharata. Mahabharata has very interesting stories, and the stories are also teaching these things. So the story is about a pigeon couple. There was a male and female pigeon, husband and wife, living on a tree. So one day one hunter came, and the male was not there, the female was there. So he threw some grain on the field, set his net. The female came to take the grain and she got caught. So after a few hours the pigeon came back and saw that his wife is not there. Wife is missing. So he was worried, what happened to my wife? Somebody kidnapped her or... So he started searching, and then he saw that this hunter was coming. It was already evening time, and hunter actually got lost in the forest. And then it started raining heavily. He was wet, and he came and took shelter under the tree on which the pigeon was living. So the pigeon thought that he has taken shelter under my tree. It's my duty now to help. Although he is seeing that his wife has been captured by him. So what he did, that he flew and he got some dry wood in his beaks and threw it on the ground. And then he went to the nearby village and brought some burning wood and dropped it on that, so there was a fire. So that this hunter can get some heat from the burning wood. And then he saw that the hunter must be hungry. So he dropped himself into the fire so that he can be roasted and the hunter can eat it. So he sacrificed himself to take care of the person who has taken shelter under his tree. So the pigeon was not selfish. So the king is thinking, if animals can do that, I am a human being. How much more I should take care of the deer. So this is his thinking. So then he continues speaking about this. Nunam hi arya sadhava upasamasilaha kripana suhida evam vidharthe swarthanapi gurutaran upekshante. because he was a very educated person, he was not an ordinary person, he was knower of the Shastra, he knew scriptures, he studied. So he says, well, the learned people, the saintly people, and those whose minds are balanced and who are friends of the lowly people, who worry or take care of those who suffer. He says that they give up selfishness to help others. Swarthanapi gurutaran, even big activities of selfishness are given up. So there is a story of King Shigi, which will come later on here, where he cuts off his own flesh from his thigh to protect a pigeon from a hawk. Because the hawk is following the pigeon, and the pigeon comes and sits in his lap. So the hawk says, "This is my food." So king says, "Well, I can give you more food." And he says, "No, I want only him." So he says, "You can take meat from my body, but don't kill this pigeon because he is under my shelter." So he actually gives meat from his own body to protect the pigeon. So he says this is what the high noble souls do. So I must also behave like that. So he says, the commentator says, Yata esha eva me vastuta swartha ityahami. So he says the swartha means my real beneficial act. Swartha is translated as selfishness, means which brings good to you. So he says actually this is real selfishness, that I help you, because that will bring good to me ultimately. So he is completely convinced about this. Iti kritanusanga asana sena atana sthana asanadishu saha mriga jahuna snehanubaddha hridayasi. So in this way, when his attachment developed because of association, when you start living with somebody, then you develop some association, especially with animals. In human beings, you may develop distaste or become dispassionate. But with animals, because animals are innocent, so his heart became completely bound. Snehanubaddha hridaya. And just like when you fall in love with somebody, how you take care, how you think. So he says when he was sitting, when he was lying down, when he went out, when he was eating, he always kept the baby deer with him. If he ate, then he will sit down with his baby deer, he will eat himself, he will also give him to eat, and he will watch him. If he went out for a walk, then he took the deer with him, thinking if he is here, maybe he can be attacked. When he slept with him. When he sat in meditation sometimes, and probably he kept the deer in his lap and meditated on him. Because now it is all deer. Because how can you forget the deer? So deer became very dear to him. So much dear that his heart was completely in love. He was very happy. When you love somebody, then you are very happy to be with that person. That gives complete satisfaction to the heart. So he was also like that. So anusanga asakti, so deep attachment. And then in the next verse it is described his attachment, how he was, how this attachment, because when you are attached, it is not working. So attachment makes you act in a particular way. Right? When you are angry at somebody, you act in a particular way towards that person. When you are attached to somebody, then you act in a particular way towards that person. So it is now showing how he was acting towards the deer because of attachment. Right, stop. So he says here that Kusa Kusuma Samita Palasa Phala Moolodakani Aharishyamano Vrikshala Vrikadibhyo Bhayamasan Samano Yadasa Harin Kunikena Vanam Samavishati. So because he was living in the forest and there was no supermarket nearby anywhere, so there was no question for him to go and buy some food. He was simply living in the forest produce. So in India also there was a lot of forest in the past. Now you don't see. But in Indian forest there are many fruit trees which used to be. Still there are some forests where there are fruit trees and mango forests. There's bale, dates, many types of fruits and roots. So he will go to collect them every day. He will also collect some kusha grass which is used for worship. It's a type of sacred grass which is very important when you do the yajna. And picking up flowers for the worship which are offered to the Lord, kusum. And samit wood for doing yajna, sacrifice. You need some wood to burn. And palash are the leaves on which you put certain articles when you have to do puja, you put on that. And phala means fruits, moola are the roots, and udaka means water. So this is what he was gathering. Aharishyamano, so but when he went out, he will take the baby deer with him because he was fearing that some jackals or wolves, they may attack the deer and kill him. Yadasa harina kunkena vanam samavista. So this is how he will always go to the forest with him. It was like a constant companion. So snehanubandhameva prapanchayati kusukusumayati. His attachment is being described here in more detail. Shalavrika kapi koshtu swana tadadita. So he feared that maybe monkeys, some monkeys in India, or jackals, or dogs can also attack. So just to protect him, he will carry him with him. And patisucha mugdha bhavena tatra tatra vishakta mati pranaya bhar hirdaya karpanyat skandhena udvahati evam utsanga urusi chadhaya upalalayam anudam paramavata. And when he was walking, and if the path was very narrow, sometimes in the mountains the path is very narrow, so then he will lift the deer and put it on his shoulders to carry him, because he was afraid that the deer can fall off, because his mind was so much full of love for the deer. Vishakta bhara hridaya. And karpanyat skandena udvati. And sometimes he will take him in his lap and embrace him to his chest and carry him like a baby. And in this way, while fondling the deer, he will feel great pleasure. He will feel so happy that as if he is living in heaven completely. Because this is the greatest pleasure, that you can live with the person you like and have a loving exchange. So that's why people keep dogs, cats, pets, so they can play with them and the dog is very happy. So he was also absorbed like this. Tatra tatra mahakardam uparitale komala trinadam mugdha bhavena kardama madhye nivangshami iti jnana rahityena vishaktam asaktam. So he is explaining that when he was going to the forest, and sometimes on the way the ground may be muddy, and he thought that maybe this deer can get stuck here, so he will lift him up and he will be so confused or bewildered that not think that if he lifts him up, then there are more chances now that he will get stuck in the mud because there is more weight. So out of affection, this idea will not come to him, because his attachment was to the deer. And this way he was passing time happily. Kriyayam nivartyamanayam antarale pi utthaya yad enam avichakshita tari vavasa varshapati prakriti sthena manasa tasma ashisha asaste swasti stanvatsate sarvati. And he was still doing some meditation, some chanting. He did not give it up completely, although his mind was now more on the deer. So he says that even when he sat down for meditation or he was doing his puja, worship of the deity, Shalagram, then in between he will get up and see where is the deer. Look at him. And he sees the deer is safe, happy, then he will come back. And when he will see the deer, then he will feel so happy and he will bless the deer. He says, "Oh my dear, please let all blessings come. God bless you." So like that he was showing his affection to the deer. Kriyayam Bhagavat Paricharyayam. Even when he was doing worship of the Lord, Antarale Madhyati. Usually when you do the worship, you are not supposed to give it up in between and do something else unless it is really necessary. Otherwise, when you do your chanting, your japa, your meditation, you stop everything else. It's not that you do chanting 2 minutes and then you sit down and eat few morsels of food and then you chant or read newspaper. So you do your spiritual practice and concentrate on that. But here he was not doing that anymore. He will stop it, he will go and look for the deer, because deer is not always hanging with him. He also goes around and plays or sits down under the tree in the shade. He has to do some cuddling for what he has eaten. So deer also must have been attached to him, but not so much. It's like when people keep pets and they are also attached to the master. You can see this many times. I have seen this in the train station. So somebody comes and yes, someone coming to receive the person from the train station comes with the dog, and then the dog is jumping, so happy to see the master coming, and jumps up him and licks him and embraces him. But after some time, he cools off. So, but not the king. And the dog may go around and do something. But the king's mind was completely fixed. So this is another thing, that when people who meditate and they become advanced in meditation, which means that they are able to control their mind, which is a very good thing. They are able to fix their mind on the object of their meditation. Now the problem with such people is that if they become deviated from their object of meditation and they become attached to something, then they also meditate on that object completely as absorbed as they were doing for their spiritual practice. Usually our minds are very flickering. We don't become absorbed so deeply in anything. Our minds always waver from one to other. But meditation teaches you to fix your mind on one thing. So if you have attained such a state of mind, and then you become a deviant, then you will become fixed on that also. It will be very difficult for you to get off from that. That's why we hear many stories about the yogis, even in the present and in the past also, that how they became deviated and they completely gave their practice because they become totally absorbed in it. Famous story of Sabri Muni here in Bhagavatam. So because we already read that king, he was fully absorbed in meditation on Krishna. Tears were flowing from his eyes, he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms on his body. So obviously his mind was quite stable. So now the same mind is only one, and it has the same quality, whether you meditate on God or you meditate on the deer. If you are able to fix your mind on God, you can also fix it on the deer, because mind has become habituated to that. So that is the reason it says that even in between he will stand up, he will get up and he will look for the deer, where is the deer, where is the deer, because mind was full of that. So kriyayam bhagavat paricharyayam api, antarale madhye api, in between also, abhichakshita. So he will think, na jane kva gato mi harin balake. He says, I don't know where my little deer has gone. And maybe some problem can come to him. So that is also another thing. When you love somebody, then you are always worried about something can go wrong with that person. So the nature of love. So he's thinking, where is my little deer cub? Maybe he's not attacked by some dogs, some jackals, wolves. So he will come to check. Utthaya pashyeta prakriti sthena taddarshan ananda prapti artha. So although he will try to do the puja, but his mind was not in the puja or worship anymore. Why? Because he was getting pleasure from this. You see, mind is naturally pleasure seeking. And it goes to that which gives you pleasure. Whether that pleasure is harmful to you, ultimately it doesn't matter. In that sense, mind is blind. So it looks for instant gratification. That is the characteristic of mind. Always looks for instant pleasure. So no matter that his spiritual practice is gone or what has happened. अन्यदा भृशम उद्विग्नमना नष्ट द्रविणैव कृपणा सकरुणमतितर्षेण हरिणपुना विराविवल हृदय संतापस्तमेव न शोचन किल कस्मलं महद्भिरं गतैति होवाच. So otherwise, if he does not see this deer, then he will become very agitated, disturbed, full of anxiety in the mind. He will feel great separation from the deer. Just like some miser person loses his wealth, how he feels troubled. Somebody steals his money and he is very disturbed. So in Sakaruna Atitarshena, he was very much like full of compassion for this deer, thirsty to be always with him, and very much looking to see and lamenting that what actually has gone wrong, what has happened, where is my deer. So like that he will become very, very disturbed and fall into very grievous situation. He will be full of grief if he was not able to see the deer. So this is the situation which is being described. I will stop here. If you have any question, then we will talk further how he will give up his body thinking of the deer and he will become deer in his next life. So any question?
So King Bharat was not Jiva Mukta. What's the difference between him and the Jiva Mukta? Could that have happened to the Jiva Mukta?
Jivan Mukta can happen. You can actually say that maybe he was also Jivan Mukta if you take this as a result of an offense. Jiva in one place describes like that. It is not possible for him to happen because he was very advanced. So it was an outcome of some past offense. So only because of some offense, Jivan Mukta can fall down, otherwise not possible.
So a Jiva Mukta can fall down, but he cannot get out of the material world just like that either.
Yeah, that's the meaning of falling down. That is the meaning of falling down. So of course he is a devotee, so he did not really fall down like become a complete deviant. Even in the life of a deer he remembered. So that's why it is said that devotees ultimately they don't fall down. Unless they do an offense to Lord himself or to the holy name, then it is possible. So bhavopi bhavam ayati. Krishna had a prana. If somebody has attained bhava, he can also lose it by doing offense to a great devotee. And that's very rare, and of course this is a very rare example. So you can say that yes, he was a Jiva Mukta, if you see it from that point of view.
So then it's compassion. So there's nothing wrong with the compassion.
What is wrong? Nothing wrong with compassion, that is being shown here.
Yeah, but then compassion itself, it's okay, but the wrong thing that he did is that he forgot because of his attachment, he forgets.
So that is the problem with compassion. If you are compassionate and you forget your path, then that compassion is a problem. Because that is not going to lead you to the ultimate good.
Because also for a king there are some duties. Right?
What is that?
He was a king, so he was brought up with this samskara to take care and to give protection.
Yeah.
So then somehow he was like rationalizing like it because this is my duty also.
Yeah, that's, of course, that's what I said, that mind will rationalize. If he was not king, he would have rationalized in some other way.
So then the wrong thing is to become attached to.
Yeah, that is the problem.
Because he could have had the logic that I have to teach this deer how to survive on his own, not that his mother is fine. Once the lesson is learned, I go.
Yeah, there is no problem in being compassionate and taking care, but problem is the attachment part. There would have been other deers also in that forest. He was not the only one. Maybe they also came to his ashram. He was not attached to them. They came and left. He did not worry, well, what will happen to them? Jackals and wolves and lions will eat them up. Every day deer must be killed by some of these ferocious animals. He was not thinking on that. That is what attachment means. So, attachment means it brings down your level of consciousness to something, one object, independent of God who is universal. So now he is only thinking of this.
Even nowadays in Kenya, the baby elephant whose mother died, they bring their baby and feed them for 3-4 years and then send them back to the forest.
Yeah, so that is okay. You feed them and then you send them, but if you become attached to that and you change your whole life, the king who had given up bigger attachments, his own children, his own wife, his own kingdom, relatives, wealth, servants, everything he gave up. And now he become attached to deer. So this is a strange thing.
Or we could say it's a lack of faith that nature will take care of itself.
Yeah, attachment, of course, does not make you think like that. That's how attachment covers your knowledge, your discernment. And it basically pollutes your intelligence. So that you cannot think clearly. Your thinking becomes topsy-turvy, convoluted.
So Babaji, can you say that comes also from the need to enjoy
Yeah,
no matter what?
this is also type of pleasure. Attachment gives happiness. It's considered that there is instant happiness from this, but when that happiness is ultimately good for you or not, that is another thing. That is the meaning of attachment. When you are attached to something, and to do that attachment to an activity, or to have that object of attachment to an object or a person, you feel happy. It's the nature of attachment.
So bottom line, it's good to be attached to devotional service to the Lord and Guru,
That is the bottom line and top line.
the top. And then you don't have all that other stuff.
Yes.
means you have to surrender.
Of course.
And people don't want to surrender.
That is also true.
So people think that if they surrender,
They will suffer.
or they'll be without something, or they'll suffer.
Yeah, they think that if I surrender, then I'll suffer. Because it is seen, if you are not, you see, we want to be free. Freedom is pleasure,
Yeah.
right? Lack of freedom is suffering. When you put somebody in a prison, what happens? You just actually curtail his freedom. That's what prison means. It's not that in prison the guy is getting beaten up or anything. You're just curtailing your freedom. So we don't like to be confined. Okay, so we'll stop here.